Hey guys, it's time to make some meatballs with Mr. Marc. This is one of my favorite things to make because they're pretty easy and they taste delicious. Sorry I couldn't make this video live. I was having some technical difficulties. But since we started making spaghetti sauce, I thought we should also make the meatballs. Okay, so I got all my ingredients. I have my about 500 grams of beef. Okay, I picked this up at Auchan in Crescent Mall. I also have all my seasonings. I have some Italian seasoning here. Just a little bit of salt. Some garlic powder. Parmesan cheese, which I grated. And I took my breadcrumbs, the croutons from the other day. They used to look like this. And then I chopped them up into small pieces of breadcrumb dust. Okay, and I have my 2 eggs. So why do I need breadcrumbs? Okay, the breadcrumbs help make the meatballs stick together and bind them, and the eggs help give it a nice, soft, luxurious texture when you're eating them. Okay, the reason I'm making these right after I made the spaghetti, the sauce, is I want to put the meatballs in the sauce to get those meatballs some nice Italian flavor from the tomato sauce. Okay, so pretty simple. Like I said, get all of your ingredients ready to go. So I'm gonna put everything into this bowl and just mix. Okay, I washed my hands, made sure they're safe and clean. Okay, always wash your hands. Okay, so some things you need to measure, some things it's more about how you like it to taste. Okay, I know I need definitely 1 egg. Okay, and I'm just going to slowly combine my ingredients and see what the texture is like. So I'll talk about it as I'm making it, what it feels like. Okay, so some Italian seasoning. Okay, you want these to taste like Italian meatballs, huh? Okay, the salt. Now you don't need too much salt, and the reason you don't need a lot of salt for the flavor is because there's actually a lot of salt in the Parmesan cheese. Okay, garlic powder. Okay, again, I like garlic. Okay, some people might not like as much as I do. Okay, you can measure with the measurements I gave you guys, but I don't measure too much when I'm cooking something I really know, because I just try to taste it. Okay, and then some of my Parmesan cheese. Okay, remember you can always add more later if you need to. Okay, and then my breadcrumbs. I'll take out my big sample pieces that I wanted to show you guys, so those don't get in there. So I just chopped them up to have this consistency. So I'm going to start again with about half. Okay, and that should give me a good base, and then as I go and mix it all together, I can know if I need to have more of anything. Okay, one important thing with the meatballs, you don't want to overwork it. You don't want to squish it too hard when you're mixing it, because all you want to do is combine the flavors. If you squish it too much when you're mixing it, you're not going to allow the sauce to get into all those different places with the meat. Okay, so just combine it. Okay, with your hands. I like the way that it feels. Some people don't. So if you don't like the way it feels, you can mix it together with a spoon or a fork, but that's not the real paisano way. Paisano means Italian. Okay, so I have a good mix going. So if you look at it, it's pretty not sticking together very well. Okay, so you can take a little bit if you're not sure. Take a small bit and try to make a meatball. Okay, and as I'm trying to roll it, it's not sticking together. Okay, it's really hard. So that means it's a little bit too wet. So I don't need to add any more eggs, but I will add some more breadcrumbs. Okay, I need to turn on my oven, but my hands are dirty, so I need to wash them before I turn on my stove, because I want to taste some of this meat before I start making the meatballs. Okay, because like I don't measure everything, I want to make sure it tastes good. All right, almost done washing my hands, rinsing off. Okay, so I'm going to warm up the oven on the stove top. Okay, and with this you don't really need to put oil because there's some fat in the beef, but if you want to, you can use a little bit of olive oil, just a small touch. Okay, and then I'm going to use a spoon so I don't keep having to wash my hands. So I'm just going to take a small little bit out. But even though I know that I need to add some more croutons, this way I can check to see if the flavor's good and see if I need to add anything else. Alright, so I just did about, well, I'll show you as that's warming up. I just did a small little tester, about that big. Okay, so doesn't cover the entire spoon there. So in the US we'd say that's about the size of a quarter. Okay, and I can hear it starting to sizzle. Okay, so it's starting to brown. So I know when I've been cooking with my dad, the reason I like doing this is the family part of it. So me, my brother, and my dad will go out and we'll make our sauce, we'll make meatballs, we'll tell some stories and jokes. So that's my favorite part of doing the Italian cooking. Of course, I also love to eat it at the end. Okay, so the bottom's done. Okay, it doesn't have to be cooked completely. Okay, that's a nice browning on there. So a small piece is great to test out. So usually I end up doing one and realizing, okay, I need to add more spices and this and that. And then I try it again, and usually the second time it's pretty good to my liking. Okay, this is almost done cooking. Okay, so I'll turn that off. I'm gonna let that cool down for 1 second before I put that in my mouth. I don't want to burn myself. So what I'm going to do today, while that's cooling down, is I'm going to make my meatballs. You could cook them in the pan the whole time. You could put them into the oven to finish them after you brown them in the pan, or you could brown them in the pan and put them in the spaghetti sauce. I like putting it into the sauce, but I understand you're not always going to have sauce to put it into. Okay, so it's still a little bit hot. Pretty good flavor. Needs a little bit more salt, but I like the Parmesan cheese to add that salt flavor, so I'm going to add a little bit more Parmesan cheese. We already knew it needed a little bit more breadcrumbs, and I need a little bit more Italian seasoning. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my meat, wash my hands real quick. Okay, that time it was already cooked meat, so it was a quick wash. Okay, but I'm going to add a little bit more breadcrumbs to help bind it together a little bit better. Okay, a little bit more Italian seasoning because it's Italian meatballs, right? Okay, and then the Parmesan cheese. Okay, all right. Now that should be plenty extra in there. Okay, I have the spoon. I hate it, guys. I really don't like mixing like this, so I got to get my hands back in there and really be able to feel the meat, so I know that the consistency is good. Something else I noticed when I was eating and trying the meatball was the meat wasn't mixed enough. Okay, so what does that mean? What does that feel like? the meat still had some like little lumps of just meat that hadn't been mixed at all. So I did say to not mix it too much, okay? Because then it's hard for the flavors to really get into everything when you're made the meatball. But you also need to make sure it's mixed enough. Okay, so it's a middle ground. I would say it's probably better to be a little bit over mixed than under mixed, especially as you're just learning how to do this. Okay, if you under mix it, it will fall apart, especially if you're cooking it into your sauce. Okay, if you over mix it, yeah, you might not get the flavors in there as well. Okay, but it won't fall apart on you as much. Okay, and I'm okay if some of my meatballs do fall apart. That's why I want it right in the middle. If my meatballs fall apart, guess what? I got a meat sauce. Okay, so that's about right. I'm going to do one more small sample. Okay, but I do feel pretty confident that this will work. So I'm going to start rolling the meatballs as I'm heating this piece up to try it out. And this one should cook a little bit faster because it's already still a little bit warm from last time. Okay, so to make your meatballs, what you want to do is, I'll use a spoon to help you guys out. But you end up taking about a spoonful size. Okay, so for me, that's about the size of my palm, the middle of it. And you don't want to overwork it too much. Okay. So sometimes you need to pinch pieces together, okay, to help it so it doesn't fall apart, to make sure that all the meat is kind of one ball here. But again, you don't want to over spin it in your hands. Okay. So I'm just doing this real lightly. Okay. Try to get that meatball. But the beautiful thing. Okay, the beautiful thing about the meatball, it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, it should be a little bit lumpy. It should be a little bit awkward looking. Okay, so that's a finished meatball. Okay, and when it cooks, I know from experience that my sides are not going to be completely rounded. They're going to end up getting a little bit square. That's okay. So put it on your cutting board, whatever you got going on. Let me toss this real quick. I can smell the Parmesan cheese cooking in it. So I'm excited to try that second piece. Okay, so I'm just going to keep making these meatballs as that one finishes warming up. So I'm not going to use a spoon this time because I know about how big I want the meatballs. Okay, question. Can the meatballs be bigger? Sure. Can the meatballs be smaller? Sure. Okay, so again, this is all about preference. When we're making them for our family, we try to give each person 1 or 2 meatballs. Okay, so we go with size about that. Okay, that's my second meatball. Okay, we don't want it to be too big or too small. And if it's too small, people will be like, hey, Mr. Marc, how come my meatball isn't big enough? And I'll be like, I'm sorry, guys. And if it's too big, they go, Mr. Marc, my meatball's too big. I can't finish it all. And we don't want to waste food. Okay, so that's almost done. So I'm going to wash my hands while that finishes. Turn it off without touching it. Okay. So ready for a taste test number 2. Smells good. It's going to be warm though. So as that's cooling down, I'm going to show you guys the pasta sauce. Before I said at the end, towards the end, I start putting in some Parmesan cheese. So you can see that as it's cooking halfway through. Okay. Maybe not. Doing a horrible job here. There we go. Found it. Okay, and I got the lid on there right now. I can smell the tomato, the parmesan, the Italian seasoning. Sorry that it's not a great view. It is time for me to mix that again, but I'll do that shortly, because I think I can taste the meatball. Let me try this piece out. Oh yeah. Yeah. You can taste the breadcrumbs in there a little bit. Parmesan cheese. Dynamite. Alright. So turn the burner on. If you're going to be putting it into the sauce, you just need to brown it a little bit on each side. It doesn't have to cook all the way through. In fact, my family likes to cook it in the sauce. So we just brown it to help it keep its shape, to try to keep it from falling apart too much. Okay. Normally I would do 5 or 6 meatballs at a time to kind of fill up the pan, but I just want to show you what happens. The process, washing the hands again. So again, you don't have to be very long on each side. If you let it sit on one side too long, it's going to flatten it out. So I actually do like to try to do it real quick. Usually these end up turning out like kind of like a pyramid meatball. But then what happens as it finishes cooking in the sauce, it ends up shrinking down a little bit. It shrinks down because the fat inside of it gets cooked away. And so that fat, as it goes away, it gets smaller. Just like in my belly, if I lost all my fat, it would shrink and go away. So these are almost done. Okay, so it doesn't take very long to brown it. In fact, when I show this to you, you might even see some of the red raw meat, and that's okay. Okay. Again, this is just to help it out a little bit before you throw it into the sauce. Okay. My heat's a little bit high. I'm getting a little bit of smoke, so that means the heat's a little bit high. Okay. But that'll be good enough. You can still hear it sizzling. Okay, so see here, you got a little bit of raw meat there, but you can still see this brown. Okay, I think that brown adds a nice flavor. Okay, and then I'm just gonna throw these into the pot. And as the sauce cooks, the meatballs cook, I will be careful when I'm stirring it to try not to break up my meatballs. Okay, they will break more in the beginning when they're still cooking than they do towards the end. Okay, so normally I cook mine for a very long time, so I know my meat will be cooked. So I would suggest at least 30 minutes in the pasta sauce to make sure that it does get cooked all the way through. Okay, again, you can cook it all the way through on the stovetop, but that's a little bit hard. So if you have a countertop oven, I would cook it in there for approximately another 15 to 20 minutes, about 180 to 200 degrees. Okay, you can always take it out, test it, make sure it's cooked. Okay, that way you're good to go. All right, that's pretty much it for me, guys. Hope you enjoy making some meatballs with Mr. Marc. If you have any questions, just let me know. Have a good day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.